The girl hears that her mother wants to sell her to the palace as a slave. She actually laughs with joy. The next day, she runs to her father's grave to say goodbye. She says she will definitely become the master of the palace. She will come back to build a big tomb for her father back home. She gives her brother a few instructions. She bows to her mother in the room. Then she leaves without looking back. As a daughter born of a concubine, becoming a palace maid is her first step to changing her fate. As soon as she enters the palace gate, she asks Court Lady Choi. She asks if living here means she can see the king. Court Lady Choi tells her that she has to wait until she grows up and becomes an official maid. On the first night, she sleeps with Court Lady Choi. She cleverly tells the court lady she has a wish. The court lady asks what it is. The girl says she wants to call her mother from now on. This touches Court Lady Choi's heart. She hugs the girl tightly. For the court lady, who has been lonely all her life, having a young maid to look after her means her old age won't be too miserable. Court Lady Choi also has a selfish motive. When, outside the palace, Court Lady Choi noticed that the girl is not an ordinary person. She is sure to have great power in the palace in the future. With the court lady as her small support, the girl begins her journey in the palace. Her first goal is very clear. She wants to become a first-class maid serving the king. Only then will she have a chance to get the king's favor for this. She practices every task seriously. She strives to do better than everyone else. This makes the other older maids very unhappy. Taking advantage of the court lady being away, they drag the girl into a room. They hold her down and make her bow, but the girl refuses. She bites one of them and stands up again. They curse her and call her a bad girl. The girl swears that when she grows up, she will definitely pay back today's humiliation. Although she screams with all her strength, she still gets beaten up. After leaving the room, the girl washes her face. She doesn't care about her injuries at all. She grabs a mirror from a companion. Seeing her face is unharmed, she laughs. Her companion asks her what is wrong. She says, as long as her face isn't ruined with her beauty, sooner or later she will get the king's favor. Then she will deal with these people. In the eyes of her young companion, this sounds like a crazy dream, but for the girl it seems like a sure thing. She dreams of seeing the king all the time. This day the chance finally comes. The old king is critically ill and the palace is in chaos. The court lady tells the young maids to stay in the room. The power struggle has nothing to do with them. The other young maids cover their ears in fear. But the girl suddenly has an idea. She stands up and says she needs the bathroom urgently. The court lady has no choice but to let her go out. She quietly opens the courtyard door. She walks to the central palace where she is not allowed. This is the place she wants to rule in the future. While she is staring, a group of people runs from behind. She turns around and sees the crown prince. This boy becomes the true love in her heart. Her admiration attached to power begins here. Meanwhile, in another part of the capital, there is another girl who also desires power. She wanted to see the king's face, but her eyes stay on the man dancing for the king. She believes this man will definitely become king. A bold idea appears in her mind. She wants to be this man's daughter-in-law. Back home, she asks her father to arrange a match and says she wants to see her father-in-law first. This worries her father, who meets the father-in-law before marriage, but he cannot beat his stubborn daughter. The old father risks his dignity to send the message unexpectedly. The other side happily agrees. Where should they meet? The girl chooses the meeting place. She chooses the place where the king accepts worship. The man asks her why she chose this place. The girl says this will eventually be his place. I want to ask you to let me become the queen. The man is shocked inside. Many people suspect he has ambition, but she is the first to be so sure he can become king. He pretends to be confused and says he lacks the ability. But the girl requests again, as if seeing through his heart. The man walks up the stone steps in front of the hall. He turns around and can indeed look down on the officials, but right now only the girl is down there. He agrees to the girl. A few days later the girl marries the man's son as promised. Whether for power or for love, the girl is indeed very satisfied with her husband, Prince Taewon. But Prince Taewon is not as ambitious as his father, Grand Prince Suyang. On the first night, he sincerely tells his wife Han Young that he has no great ambition and follows his fate, but his love for Han Young will never change. This is enough for Han Young. The power she desires is not something to be shared anyway. Although she successfully gained the approval of her father-in-law and husband, her mother-in-law still looks down on Han Young. She even forbids the newlyweds from sleeping together. Han Young must change this situation. Soon an opportunity comes, as they are royal relatives. The mother-in-law has to take her to greet Lady Hui Bin in the palace. The mother-in-law and Hui Bin have always been enemies. As soon as they enter, Hui Bin speaks. She asks about this daughter-in-law. Wasn't she going to be a concubine for the Ming Emperor? How did she end up in your house? The mother-in-law's face changes instantly, as if her son married a rejected woman. Han Yung immediately speaks up. What is the point of being a concubine in the Ming royal family? I am the main wife of a royal relative here. She invisibly raises the status of her husband's family. Hui Bin's face looks bad, and she speaks aggressively. She mocks that they are just powerless relatives. What is the difference between a main wife and a concubine? Here relatives are the legitimate bloodline of the royal family, not something a concubine can compare with. This is obviously saying Hui Bin is just the king's concubine. Hui Bin's face gets uglier. The mother-in-law finally feels relieved, walking out. She praises Han Yung's performance. Han Yung takes the chance to hold her mother-in-law's arm. She wants her mother-in-law to allow her to sleep with her husband. But unexpectedly, the mother-in-law's face changes instantly. During the meal, Han Yung continues to beg. The mother-in-law still does not give in. At night, she secretly goes to find her husband, but they are caught by the mother-in-law this time. Han Yung gets angry and asks for a reason. The mother-in-law doesn't explain and locks her in a separate house. Finally, the father-in-law begs, and the mother-in-law gives a reason. Women who have too many children die early. She runs to tell Han Yung she is allowed to sleep with him once a month. Husband and wife cannot live normally. Han Yung puts her mind on helping her father-in-law solve crises. Now Grand Prince Suyang's house is quiet and deserted, while on the other side Grand Prince Ampyong is very popular because he is close to the powerful official Kim Jong-il. Han Yung sees large amounts of supplies in the warehouse. She tells her mother-in-law to be generous with money. If you have things, give them out to win people's hearts. Now even beggars say Grand Prince Ampyong is generous. But unexpectedly the mother-in-law tells her to shut up. This makes Han Yung so angry. She goes back to her room. Han Yung packs her things to go back to her parents' home. Prince Taowan hurriedly comes to persuade her. Hearing her son and daughter-in-law being affectionate in the room, she pushes the door open and says to her daughter-in-law, if you want to go back to your parents, go early. See if I, your mother-in-law, will pick you up. After speaking, she turns and leaves. The daughter-in-law, who was already persuaded by her son, now feels she must leave. She thinks if she lowers her head now she will be suppressed by her mother-in-law forever. The son has no choice but to ask his father to talk to his mother. Before Suyang can speak, his wife starts complaining that the daughter-in-law has no manners. She has no respect for elders. She says it is because Suyang lost power that the daughter-in-law dares to rely on her family's power to be lawless here. Suyang gets anxious and says this is impossible because he has an agreement with his daughter-in-law. The mother-in-law immediately asks what agreement. Suyang hesitates for a long time and dares not say, because only his daughter-in-law can see. He will become king. He promised to make his daughter-in-law the crown princess, and then the queen. Taowan hears his parents' conversation outside. He roughly knows his father will rebel. The next day, the father calls Taowan. He says the matter with the daughter-in-law is solved because the crown prince is coming to stay at the house. Even if your mother disagrees, the daughter-in-law has to come back. On the day the crown prince arrives, Taowan waits for his mother to tell him to bring his wife back. But his mother says, I don't think your wife dares to come. She can't stand a mother-in-law like me. Just as she speaks, Han Yung runs back by herself. The mother-in-law's face changes instantly. It seems Han Yung wants to fight her to the end. The crown prince comes and sees Han Yung for the first time. He tells Taowan that his sister-in-law is so beautiful. It is really not right that you sleep in separate rooms. The mother-in-law looks embarrassed hearing this. It was she who made them sleep separately. Han Yung saves the situation for her mother-in-law. She says it is because her husband cannot focus on studying if they live together, so they separated. The mother-in-law is surprised by Han Yung's quick wit. Again, the crown prince's visit is arranged perfectly by Han Yung. A few days later, the crown prince returns to the palace reluctantly. The palace also faces a sudden change. The king vomits blood and falls unconscious. The doctor says he may not survive the night. The news spreads quickly. Various factions in the court start to move. Grand Prince Suyang is the first to rush into the palace. He kneels in front of the hall begging to see the king. But the palace is controlled by Hui Bin. She doesn't give Suyang a chance. Instead, she sends someone to call the powerful official Kim Jong-il. Seeing Suyang has not returned for a long time. The The wife anxiously asks her son Taowan to take people into the palace. The wife anxiously asks her son Taowan to take people into the palace. Han Yung says, "What is the use of taking a few servants? You should call all the royal relatives to enter the palace together. That way Kim Jong-il will definitely not dare to hurt father." All the relatives arrive, but they still cannot enter the hall. Kim Jong-il quietly enters through a small door. He kneels in front of the unconscious king for a moment. Hui Bin asks, "You heard the king's last words, right? What a trick of creating something from nothing." Kim Jong-il understands. He immediately goes out and tells the relatives he claims he was appointed as the guardian minister by the king and asks everyone to leave. How could the relatives give up just like that? Kim Jong-il orders soldiers to surround the hall. Meanwhile at the homes of the relatives, he also sent people. The royal relatives are completely controlled. The next day the king dies, and the young crown prince succeeds to the throne, but he is just a puppet of Kim Jong-il. Suyang knows Kim Jong-il will not let him go, so he applies to go to the Ming dynasty as an envoy. As soon as he leaves, the supporters who provided funds for Suyang also change sides, one by one. Han Yung goes back to her parents' home and gathers various gold and silver jewelry. She asks her mother-in-law to use them to win people's hearts. She really hopes her father-in-law can become king. She tells her husband to be prepared. Sooner or later you have to choose between your father and the king. One of them must die. Hearing this, Taowan's heart tightens. But Taowan hopes his father will not rebel. The next day the king summons the couple to the palace. The woman warns Taowan again. Do not look directly at his majesty, saying he is too bad at lying. Taowan feels his wife's cunning for the first time. Coming to the main hall, the king says, "I called you today because your father, Grand Prince Suyang, is coming back from the Ming dynasty soon. I just discussed with the left minister to send him to welcome him." Seeing the king and hearing his father's name, Taowan immediately remembers what his wife said. One of these two must die. He is too nervous to look up. Han Yung immediately takes over the conversation, saying there is no need for trouble. It is right for father to share the king's burden. Han Yung and the king talk back and forth happily. Taowan buries his head deeper and deeper. That night back home, Han Yung tells Taowan, "You can only stand on your father's side. The king is no longer the innocent crown prince. He was testing us today." At the same time, he also tested left minister Kim Jong-il. Taowan looks at Han Yung in disbelief. Han Yung tells him, "Maybe every intimacy the king showed you before was with an ulterior motive. The most respected father wants to rebel. The king, who is like a brother, is using him." Taowan's worldview completely collapses soon after Grand Prince Suyang returns. He gained a strategist named Han Mingho, known as the Zhuge Liang of Joseon. Han Mingho is responsible for recruiting talent for Suyang. He does the opposite of what is expected. He makes the recruitment known to the whole city. Being so high profile makes everyone unsure if Suyang wants to rebel or not. The powerful official Kim Jong-il visits personally to test him. Suyang comes out barefoot to welcome him, constantly showing weakness. Although Kim Jong-il does not believe in Suyang's loyalty, he doesn't find anything unusual at this moment. Later the king summons their family again. The king constantly shows weakness to win them over, but his eyes are full of suspicion. Han Yung catches every detail. The king is indeed no longer innocent. She reminds Taowan again. The king is using them to fight against Kim Jong-il. But Taowan says he can sacrifice his life to protect his majesty, to protect his own worldview. Taowan chooses to believe in the goodness of this world. Han Yung can only sigh helplessly behind him. Just as the two are about to leave the palace, Han Yung sees a little maid being scolded by a court lady. She loves to interfere, so she calls out to them. She asks the court lady to spare her, but the little maid is not satisfied with this result at all. The woman calls her and says she saved her from punishment. Why isn't there even a thank you? The little maid answers that because you spoke for me. The court lady will beat me harder later, so I don't think I should thank you. The woman sees she is a really tough girl at this moment. Neither of them realizes that one of them will become the Grand Queen Dowager, and one will become the queen, and they will fight a life and death battle for power. This tough scene of the girl is happened to be seen by the head court lady. Being old, she wants to find someone to rely on. The ambitious Song Yi becomes her first choice. She calls Song Yi to her. She wants to take her to visit the Great Hall and deliberately takes Song Yi to the queen's residence. She tells Song Yi this place is empty now. Who knows who will rule it in the future? Song Yi smiles slightly. She knows that, as the head of the maids, The head court lady will give her great help in the future. Two people who need each other reach a tacit consensus when Song-yi's teacher, Court Lady Choi, comes to find her. She hides in the room and doesn't come out. The head court lady drives Court Lady Choi away. Song-yi stays at the head court lady's place from then on. Although she has the big tree of the head court lady, the scheming Song-yi doesn't want to offend anyone. A few days later, Court Lady Choi calls Song-yi from behind. Song-yi wanted to ignore her, but Court Lady Choi calls again. Song-yi prepares her emotions. She turns around and runs towards Court Lady Choi with tears in her eyes. It gets dark and the head court lady doesn't see Song-yi. She thinks she must have been taken by Court Lady Choi. She runs to Court Lady Choi's place, and before entering, she hears Court Lady Choi asking Song-yi where she feels more comfortable living. Song-yi says without hesitation that it is comfortable here. To appear more genuine, she also says various bad things about the head court lady. The head court lady is furious, but doesn't go in. She orders the young maid never to tell anyone that she was here. Then she turns and leaves. When Song-yi returns, the head court lady pretends to be asleep. She doesn't say a word because Court Lady Choi is backed by Grand Prince Soo-young's wife. Instead of tearing their faces apart, it's better to play dumb. Song-yi continues to serve in the Great Hall. This day she hears the king and the eunuch plotting a big event. The king tells the eunuch, "There must be no casualties." Song-yi rolls her eyes. She runs to Court Lady Choi and lies. She claims she just heard from an inner official that many court ladies will die tonight. She warns the court lady to stay in the house and not go out. Court Lady Choi is moved to tears by Song-yi's warning. She doesn't know that the affection she values has become a tool for Song-yi to use her. This time Song-yi indeed bet on the right side. The ones starting the uprising tonight are exactly Grand Prince Soo-young's family, who are close to Court Lady Choi. Song-yi returns to the Great Hall, and the court lady tells her to go back and hide. But how could Song-yi hide? What she wants is this chaotic world, the position of queen she didn't dare to hope for before. Now she wants to give it a try. She tells the king to rest assured. She swears she will protect the king. But she didn't expect that after tonight her destiny will be pulled in another direction. A small knife and a bottle of poison are on the floor. The mother-in-law asks the daughter-in-law to choose one, because their husbands are going to do a big thing tonight. If they fail, they won't escape death. But the daughter-in-law says there is no need. She married into this family because she saw that her father-in-law, Soo-young, has the face of an emperor. He definitely won't die tonight. Indeed, Soo-young, bringing only one follower, tricks the powerful official Kim Jong-seo. He kills him with a hammer in Kim Jong-seo's mansion. Then he leads people to the palace gate. According to the agreement between him and the king, at this moment the king should issue a decree proving that Soo-young was assigned by him to kill the powerful official Kim Jong-seo. But the king, persuaded by his personal eunuch, not only does not issue the decree, but also closes all palace gates. The king fears that if Kim Jong-seo is not dead, his decree might bring fire upon himself. But for Soo-young, without a decree, this action lacks legitimacy and is no different from rebellion. Soo-young, who is already full of ambition, feels used and completely breaks away from the king. Angry, he draws his sword to break into the palace, but his son Tao-won blocks him. Loyalty to the king is Tao-won's belief. He says the king will definitely keep his promise. Soo-young finally couldn't strike. Tao-won finds a small door. He wants to enter the hall to protect the king, but he is still stopped by the suspicious eunuch, Yen. Soo-young can't care so much anymore. He orders the eunuchs to use the king's name to summon all ministers into the palace. Then he comes to the side hall looking at the throne, thinking, since it is within reach, why not take a step further at this time? Ministers have arrived one after another. Strategist Han Ming-ho gives the general a book. Strategist Han Ming-ho gives the general a book. The ministers whose names are in it must die. Tonight, ministers arrive one by one. Those who enter the left door live. Those who enter the right door die. Hearing the screams of officials outside, eunuch Yin and Huibin also panic. Huibin thinks Kim Jong-seo must be dead, otherwise he would have brought soldiers long ago. Now let the king issue the decree, otherwise Soo-young will be enraged. But eunuch Yin asks to wait a bit longer. To show goodwill, they decide to let Tao-won in first. Eunuch Yin's desire for stability and suspicious nature foreshadow the tragic fate of the king and themselves. Tao-won looks at the panicked king. A feeling of pity and guilt arises spontaneously. The king asks Tao-won what the noise outside is about. Taoan answers that his father is clearing out the rebels. But the king says seriously that he knows nothing about this, because now loyal and traitor are hard to distinguish. Whoever wins is the loyal subject. This attitude of enjoying the fruit without effort makes Suyang lose his heart again. Suyang, outside the door, suddenly receives news saying Kim Jong-seo is still alive. Grand Prince Suyang panics for a moment. If Kim Jong-seo contacts the army outside the city, then he will definitely die. Until the next morning, Kim Jong-seo is still not found. Suyang knows he is going to fail. He asks a servant to send a message home, while he walks to the side hall preparing to kill himself. But at this moment Kim Jong-seo also makes a mistake. Although he monopolized power, Kim Jong-seo is a loyal subject. At this moment he is still thinking of going to the palace to protect the king. As a result, he is discovered by Suyang's men outside the palace gate. He and his son are both stabbed to death. He is still calling for the king before he dies. Han Mingho immediately reports the news to Suyang. The sudden turn of events leaves Suyang stunned that he wants to personally confirm Kim Jong-seo's body. The loyal subject of 3 reigns died because of Suyang and also died because of the young king's timid and suspicious character. The news reaches the palace quickly. At this moment the king thinks of welcoming Suyang into the palace, giving him the decree he wanted, but it is too late. Suyang has already set his eyes on his throne. In the following 2 years, Suyang monopolizes power. He cleans up Kim Jong-seo's remnants bit by bit. Even his own brother, Grand Prince Ampyong, was exiled by him and then committed suicide. Han Yung also gives birth to a son and a daughter. Everything is developing in the direction Suyang expected. Now he just needs to get rid of eunuch Yin and Hui Bin. He can force the king to abdicate, but she tells her father-in-law to wait. The father-in-law doesn't understand. She says, "Find a queen for the young king first." The mother-in-law looks at the daughter-in-law and says, "We are about to make the young king abdicate. Why find him a queen?" But Grand Prince Suyang understands this is the best way to lower the enemy's guard. So he organizes to find a wife for the king. After some selection, a girl named Song is chosen. The reason for choosing her is because the girl's father has no power. He won't block Suyang's path to the throne in the future. This move indeed works. The king marries. The faction of Hui Bin opposing Suyang immediately relaxes their vigilance, thinking Suyang won't rebel for a while. They want to use this opportunity to bring down Suyang, so they let their son meet secretly with Grand Prince Jumseong. They want to do what Suyang did to Kim Jong-seo, a small force fighting a big one, and the location is chosen in the palace. A small force fighting a big one, and the location is chosen in the palace. Suyang gets the news quickly. He lets a general from the Inspector General's office enter the palace under the pretext of inspection. Eunuch Yin sees it is Suyang's man and naturally refuses entry. The man deliberately provokes Eunuch Yin. Eunuch Yin orders men to arrest the man. But how can these eunuchs be a match for the man? The man takes the chance to beat Eunuch Yin up. Hui Bin asks the king to punish the culprit severely. Hui Bin asks the king to punish the culprit severely. At this time Han Mingho comes to see the king, saying the man was doing a routine inspection but was threatened with weapons by the eunuch, so he fought back and requests the king to punish Eunuch Yin severely. Hui Bin certainly disagrees. But the king has to agree because Han Mingho represents Suyang. He doesn't want Suyang to catch any leverage, having got rid of Eunuch Yin. The next is Hui Bin. Suyang calls the newly appointed eunuch Tian. Suddenly a woman's voice comes from the room. It is Suyang's daughter-in-law. She asks Eunuch Tian to cut the number of inner officials in the palace by half, leaving the room. Eunuch Tian breaks into a cold sweat. Inner officials are incomplete men. How can they survive outside the palace? He suddenly feels Suyang's daughter-in-law is too ruthless on this side. Suyang says Eunuch Tian seems not smart enough. Han Yung says such a person is good. He will execute your orders regardless of everything. These two are like a warlord and his strategist, making the mother-in-law unable to interrupt and full of anger at Han Yung. Eunuch Tian indeed executes the order. Well, he kicks out all the inner officials who were once in Eunuch Yan's faction. Hui Bin is still bewitching the king to fight Suyang, but the king has no ability anymore. A few days later, Suyang calls Han Mingho and specifically keeps his daughter-in-law. They are going to deal with Hui Bin. Han Yung says, although Hui Bin is of the king's grandmother's generation, she is not the main wife. She makes the king call her grandmother. Then aren't her 2 sons the king's uncles? How can illegitimate princes be uncles? Use this to drive Hui Bin out of the palace. Han Mingho realizes instantly, and the three laugh. The next day, Huibin's son is arrested. First, the charge is claiming to be the king's uncle, then Grand Prince Jimseong. Now the king and Huibin have no forces to contact outside the palace. Seong starts the final step. He puts on his official uniform. He wants to enter the palace overnight to force the king to abdicate, but just out the door his son Taowon blocks him. A fierce conflict breaks out between the two. This brave yet foolish behavior makes his wife, Han Yung, both heartbroken and helpless. Seong walks past his son. The mother says Taowon is disappointing. Although Han Yung always wanted to be the crown princess, she still holds her husband's hand at this moment. She understands her father-in-law's ambition, but she understands Taowon's purity and sincerity even more. Han Yung praises her husband for doing well, saying he can block his father righteously. Compared to a shrinking, silent son, he makes people more proud. Seong ascends the throne as he wished. The young former king is honored as the king emeritus and kicked out of the palace. Huibin is sent to a nunnery. Taowon is named crown prince. After being ignored for a while, Han Yung finally achieves her first goal, crown princess. She looks forward to becoming the queen smoothly, but Taowon lives in guilt towards the former king, being sick in bed all day. During this period, Han Yung becomes pregnant with her third child, Hearing. The daughter-in-law is pregnant with a grandson. This mother-in-law is actually a bit unhappy. Her idea is simple. Now the crown prince has been sick for a long time. She doesn't want her grandson to inherit the throne because then the daughter-in-law would become the queen dowager. She wants to fight for power with her daughter-in-law, so she immediately calls her younger son, asking him to greet the king, often to win his favor. As long as the younger son is named crown prince, then the daughter-in-law will have a hard time recovering. A few months later, the daughter-in-law gives birth to a royal grandson. The king really loves this grandson very much. The queen, Insu's mother-in-law, beside him doesn't want to look at him. The daughter-in-law doesn't care so much. Just as the king is playing with his little grandson, the crown prince suddenly faints. His illness gets worse and the doctors are helpless. The queen has no time to care about her eldest son. She immediately finds her brother asking what to do after the crown prince dies. The brother doesn't understand and says, according to etiquette, after the crown prince dies, the grandson should succeed. The queen says, if we follow etiquette, the king is just a grand prince too. The brother laughs and understands immediately. The queen wants her second son to become the new crown prince. The brother begins to be active widely in the queen's name, winning the hearts of the officials. The king also gets the news. He summons strategist Han Mingho and gives him a task, protect his daughter-in-law, Han Yung. He knows the queen may be unscrupulous this time. Indeed, a few days later, Han Yung takes a walk with the slightly improved crown prince. As a result, the crown prince suddenly falls ill. The queen immediately targets Han Yung, saying she has evil intentions, knowing the crown prince is sick, yet still taking him for a walk, probably wants her son to be the grandson sooner. Then the queen finds the king saying, the crown prince defied the king many times. If the grandson succeeds and is like the crown prince, he might criticize the king's usurpation. The queen asks to establish the second son's status. The king gives no comment. The crown prince fails to survive that night and dies of sudden illness. The king holds the crown prince and cries bitterly. The crown prince was upright and gentle. Maybe he couldn't be a good ruler, but he was definitely a good son. After the crown prince died, ministers come one after another to suggest the king appoint a new crown prince, basically all recommending the second prince. The king knows the queen is manipulating all this. He personally finds the queen, but she doesn't give in. This is her best chance to bring down her daughter-in-law. She won't let it go easily. The king summons his daughter-in-law with guilt before he speaks. Han Yung understands what he means. She actively proposes to leave the palace and live in a private house. After thanking the king, she leaves with her two sons. The king calls her from behind. The king promised to let Han Yung become the queen. Now it cannot be realized. This is what he owes his daughter-in-law. Han Yung doesn't look back. She wants to leave this debt in the king's heart. Only in this way, years later, when she makes conditions, the king won't bear to refuse her. At the same time, the king assigns two maids to her. One is the old court lady Choi. One is Song Yi, who is only 10 years old. Song Yi, who always wanted to change her fate, only now catches the tail of destiny because in the private house, Han Yung's younger son, Prince Jalson, grew up on Song Yi's back. It is this child who becomes Song Yi's ticket to change fate in a blink of an eye. For years pass. Prince Jalsin grows up a bit. His dependence on Song Yi becomes stronger. But at this time they are still in the process of building affection. The royal grandson falls. The little maid stands aside laughing at him. Prince Jalsin immediately fake cries and Song Yi panics. As expected, she gets scolded by court lady Choi. Hearing Prince Jalsin laughing proudly outside, Song Yi is not convinced. The next day, she takes Prince Jalsin to play in the mountains. Prince Jalsin asks Song Yi to catch fish for him. Song Yi feels the time has come. She pushes Prince Jalsin into the water with her hip. Revenge is taken, but back home Song Yi gets beaten again. Unexpectedly, this time Prince Jalsin comes in to plead for Song Yi, saying it was his fault. Court lady Choi pulls Song Yi down and complains while hitting her. How can a little maid run around holding Prince Jalsin's hand? Song Yi says nothing but smiles with satisfaction. At night, with thunder and lightning, Song Yi kneels outside the door accompanying Prince Jalsin. Reading from this moment, she has fallen in love with Prince Jalsin. It is a like without desire for power. All this is seen by Prince Jalsin's mother, Han Young. 6 years later, Prince Jalsin is 10 and Song Yi is 19. The ignorant Prince Jalsin doesn't understand love, but he relies on Song Yi more even for dressing him. He feels court lady Choi is not as good as Song Yi. Also in this year, rumors spread that the king wants to abdicate. To the crown prince, Song Yi and court lady Choi are to be recalled to the palace for duty. She makes an agreement with Prince Jalsin not to forget her. Then she hugs Prince Jalsin tightly. She really can't bear to leave here. Han Young, who has been dormant for 10 years, is no longer young. At this time, everyone calls her Lady Su Bin, hearing the king wants to abdicate. She also wants to start taking back what belongs to her, the power belonging to her son. The first trip to the palace in 10 years. The king, who has always felt guilty towards her, specially prepared a sedan chair for her. Arriving at the palace gate, the crown prince welcomes her personally, but Su Bin is in no hurry to get off the sedan. Until the crown prince nods to show respect, Su Bin lets the sedan down. Until the crown prince nods to show respect, Su Bin lets the sedan down. She bows to the crown prince. Her fierce eyes make the crown prince dare not look straight at her. Coming to the royal hall, how much the king desires Su Bin to ask for something. Only then can his inner guilt be relieved. Su Bin says she wants her cousin to serve in the royal secretariat. The royal secretariat is the place to convey king's orders and report officials' memorials. The king happily agrees and gives a position of left vice-royal secretary. Then Su Bin goes to see her mother-in-law, the queen. She tells her mother-in-law that once Prince Jalsin gets married, she plans to guard her husband's grave for the rest of her life. She entrusts her 2 sons to her mother-in-law's care. The queen certainly doesn't believe it, but seeing no trick from Su Bin at the moment, she casually agrees. Su Bin walks out of the palace. The previous sedan chair is replaced by a small sedan. She knows this is her mother-in-law showing her power. Su Bin says nothing and gets on the sedan to leave the nanny. Sending her out immediately reports to the queen. Even so, the queen still doesn't believe Su Bin has no ambition. She tells the crown prince, never get too close to Su Bin's family. She will seize your position at any moment. The crown prince is kind-hearted, although he disagrees. He says nothing. The cousin who got the official position comes to see Su Bin immediately. Su Bin tells him, I gave you this position so that you can tell me the affairs of the court. After arranging this side, Su Bin goes to find Han Mingho as an old official who rose with the king. Back then Han Mingho holds the position of chief state counselor. Su Bin tells Han Mingho directly. She wants that after the crown prince ascends the throne, let her son become the crown prince's adopted son to enter the Eastern Palace. At the same time, she will make Han Mingho's daughter her daughter-in-law. Han Mingho doesn't want to get involved in this messy water, but Su Bin has caught him. She has a way to make Han Mingho have to help her. The next day she goes to the king again. She knows the king prepares to abdicate to the crown prince, but she says it is not the time yet. The king asks why. The daughter-in-law says the crown prince cannot handle the meritorious officials who rebelled with you back then. The king knew this was a problem long ago. He just didn't make up his mind. And the reason Su Bin says it out loud is to make the king start taking action. When the king stands on the opposite side of the meritorious officials, she will act to pull the officials to her camp. Back at the residence, her cousin asks her, how will the king deal with the officials? Su Bin says to clear the way for the crown prince. The king will definitely eradicate them. It's just that the king needs a pretext. Now everyone can only wait. Maybe the heavens open their eyes just half a month later. Maybe the heavens open their eyes just half a month later. The pretext the king and Su Bin were waiting for appears at a banquet initiated by the king, Yang Yung, a meritorious official who followed the king in the uprising because he was unhappy about being exiled to Pyongan province for a long time. He contradicted the king on the spot and said, since the king wants to abdicate, then he should let the crown prince inherit the throne quickly. The king immediately says, then let's do as you said. I never cling to the throne. Then the king asks the royal secretary to bring the royal seal. He wants to abdicate right now. The ministers present kneel down quickly, advising the king not to abdicate. But the king has made up his mind, roaring for the royal secretary to bring the royal seal immediately. The royal secretary is in a dilemma. The king shouts that he will abdicate tonight, telling the crown prince and the royal secretary to get ready. Then he returns to his sleeping quarters. Su Bin also gets the news, and she guesses immediately. This is the king wanting to get rid of Han Mingho, as the #1 contributor to the king's uprising back then, currently holding the position of chief state counselor. His students and former subordinates are all over the court. The king certainly wants to remove him first. Indeed, as Su Bin said, the king returns to the royal hall, roaring that this is definitely not Yang Yung's act alone. It must be Han Mingho instructing behind the scenes. At this time the officials stand outside. The crown prince kneels on the ground in plain clothes. Left State Councilor Shin Suk-ju enters the royal hall, representing everyone to request the king to withdraw the order. The king says his abdication is to let the crown prince enter the state earlier, so the crown prince can be stable when he dies. Shin Suk-ju actually believes what the king said. He goes out to tell the officials that the king is sincere about abdication, asking the royal secretary to bring the royal seal. But inside the hall the king sneers, saying he didn't expect Shin Suk-ju to have disloyal thoughts too when the royal seal is brought. The king is not in a hurry to abdicate. Instead he calls Han Mingho and Shin Suk-ju, asking how to deal with Yang Yung. Han Mingho says he should be handed over to the state tribunal for severe punishment. The king says to Han Mingho, questioning, shouldn't we kill him? Han Mingho knows the king's meaning this is to kill himself. Su Bin stays awake all night. She knows it's her turn. Early the next morning, she goes to see the king, persuading the king not to abdicate. The king also says, without dealing with these ministers, he won't abdicate. Listening to the king's complaints, she says Yang Yung should be killed. The king asks Su Bin to make tea for him. But while making tea, Su Bin starts crying. The king asks why. Su Bin mentions two things. First, is the king back, then asking Han Mingho to protect their mother and son. Second, is after the king's uprising back, then killing two of his own brothers. Then she asks the king, after you pass away and the crown prince succeeds, even if the crown prince is gentle and generous, will those powerful officials spare her two sons who have inheritance rights? The more she speaks, the harder Su Bin cries. The king already feels guilty towards Su Bin. Hesitating for a moment, he says to Su Bin, I promise you not to kill Han Mingho. Let him continue to protect you, mother and son. This is exactly the result Su Bin wanted. She walks out of the hall smiling. Han Mingho, who never wanted to help her, now has to stand on her side and marries his daughter to Su Bin's son, Prince Jalsin. Just as they prepare to push Prince Jalsin as the crown prince's adopted son, a new problem appears again. The crown princess gives birth to a son. The newly born grandson doesn't cry. Everyone is worried, but this little maid is praying. The grandson must not cry better if he dies, because only then will Prince Jalsin, whom she likes, have a chance to sit on the throne. But God didn't grant her wish. The child cries. Eventually Song-yi returns to the residence and tells the news to her teacher, Court Lady Choi. The experienced Court Lady Choi has no time to be sad. She immediately looks for a way out. She asks the head court lady to arrange Song-yi to the eastern palace where the crown prince lives, hoping Song-yi can be favored by the crown prince and rise to the sky in one step. The head court lady agrees fully. Going out, she pinches Song-yi's face. This beautiful face is Song-yi's only chip to change her fate. After the head court lady leaves, Song-yi scolds her teacher for having no backbone, changing sides so quickly. But the teacher says it is because I had too much backbone that I am lonely and miserable all my life. Maids can only change their fate by gaining favor by any means. Song-yi hugs her teacher, secretly, swearing she must get favor. But things don't go smoothly. The head court lady doesn't give them a reply for a long time. Court Lady Choi takes Song-yi begging humbly. Again, the head court lady talks about other things, saying a large sum of money is needed for connections. This troubles Court Lady Choi. At this time she hasn't realized. The head court lady will never give Song-yi a position in the Eastern Palace. If Song-yi really gets favored, then Court Lady Choi would climb over her head. The head court lady won't allow such a thing to happen. She wants to suppress Court Lady Choi and Song-yi firmly. But unexpectedly the god of destiny favors Song-yi again. This day, the bored Song-yi takes the chance of leaving the palace to go to Soo-bin's house, saying to give thanks, actually, to visit Prince Jalson. After greeting Lady Soo-bin, she is pulled by Prince Jalson to his small courtyard. It turns out Prince Jalson just got married. He doesn't understand marital affairs yet, and wants to ask Song-yi. Song-yi laughs loudly hearing this. Prince Jalson says, "You aren't married either. Why laugh at me?" But Song-yi says she is already an official maid, which is equivalent to being married to the king. Prince Jalson still doesn't understand. Song-yi thinks she can never be with Prince Jalson again. She cries unconsciously. Prince Jalson asks Song-yi what's wrong with concern. Song-yi says sand got into her eyes. Prince Jalson pulls Song-yi over to blow into her eyes. Looking at such a warm Prince Jalson, Song-yi cries even harder. Prince Jalson holds Song-yi's face to blow into her eyes again. This time Song-yi finally can't help it. She hugs Prince Jalson tightly. She wishes time would stop at this moment. But right at this time Prince Jalson's aunt, Lady Gun, passes by. Although Prince Jalson pleads, Song-yi is still beaten by Lady Gun for being shameless. Prince Jalson can only be anxious. Outside, Lady Gun also tells this to Prince Jalson's mother, Soo-bin. Soo-bin is not unhappy. Instead, she has an idea. She wants to ask for Song-yi from the palace to take care of Prince Jalson, because Prince Jalson's young wife is in very poor health. She wants her daughter-in-law to go back to her parents' home to recover. At this moment, no one imagines this simple idea changes the second half of Soo-bin and Song-yi's lives. Things go smoothly. The queen agrees to let Song-yi leave the palace. Song-yi is very happy too. But Song-yi's teacher, Court Lady Choi, feels like being struck by lightning. She still pins her hope for Song-yi's future on the Eastern Palace. Fearing her teacher would stop her, Song-yi goes to Soo-bin's house in a hurry, without even saying goodbye. Court Lady Choi is thoroughly enraged. She finds the queen as an old court lady who served Soo-bin for 10 years. She tells the queen about Soo-bin wanting her son to inherit the throne. To stop the daughter-in-law from coveting the throne, the mother-in-law takes action. A list of people colluding with rebels is presented to the king. Seeing the names on it, the king is shocked. It includes the two most important ministers in the court, the chief state counselor and left state counselor. True or false? The king orders to arrest the two first. The daughter-in-law knows this. Is the mother-in-law trying to break her wings because the chief state counselor is her man? Indeed, the mother-in-law comes to find her that night and lays cards on the table. As long as Soo-bin doesn't covet the throne, she will release chief state counselor Han Ming-ho. Soo-bin doesn't agree. If it was so easy to kill Han Ming-ho, the mother-in-law wouldn't have come to find her. They part on bad terms back in the palace. The queen finds the king. The king knows this incident. Is the queen fighting with the daughter-in-law to ease the relationship between them? He promises the queen, once the rebellion in the north is quelled, he will abdicate to the crown prince. But there is a condition: release Han Ming-ho. Soo-bin hears this news, and she is not satisfied. She enters the palace to see the king the next day. She asks the king, questioning if the king forgot how he ascended the throne. Hearing this, the king is very angry. But Soo-bin doesn't stop. She continues, the crown prince is weak if something happens. The young grandson succeeds in a hurry. There may still be other relatives like you back, then taking the grandson's throne. The king is furious and kicks Soo-bin out. But Soo-bin knows her words have entered the king's heart. Indeed, that night the king asks Soo-bin's cousin to send her a blank decree. She can write whatever content she wants. Soo-bin accepts it silently. This is her last card. Soon after the rebellion in the north is quelled, the king keeps the promise with the queen, letting the crown prince act as regent, and arranges a young team for the crown prince, giving the position of chief state counselor to 28-year-old Prince Gwaizong. Equally young Nam Yi is named Minister of War. Military and political power is now all in the hands of the crown prince's people. The old guys formed before are all kicked off the stage. Soo-bin realizes the king must be terminally ill. What makes her more fearful is, What makes her more fearful is the king's arrangement makes her unable to move. It seems the blank decree is only for her to save herself, not for her to push her son as the throne successor, as Subin thought. A few days later the king faints. Then he becomes delirious. The whole palace is in panic. The new Minister of War, Nam-e, suggests to the chief state counselor to send troops immediately to surround the old ministers and Subin's residence. The chief state counselor hesitates. Urged by Nam-e, he finally agrees. This is the hardest night for Subin. As long as the king doesn't stop it, Nam-e can give an order at any time to behead these old ministers and her. At this time, Nam-ye's subordinate, Yu Jiaguang, suggests they should act decisively, without asking for a decree, attack Subin and the old ministers directly. Eager for merit, Nam-e actually agrees. Subin also thinks of a way to escape at this moment. She asks a servant to run to Grand Prince Imyong's house. Just say it's someone from Lady Subin's house. Grand Prince Imyong is the father of Chief State Counselor Prince Guizong, the king's brother. He survived until now by not fighting or grabbing. Getting the news, Grand Prince Imyong goes to the palace. Immediately seeing his son, Prince Guizong, he scolds him loudly. If you kill Subin's family, not only will the king bear a bad name, you will have to pay the debt sooner or later. Then he breaks into the hall and kneels before the king saying, "Enough, people were killed back then. No more killing one's own flesh and blood." The king softens and sheds a tear. The soldiers at Subin's door all withdraw. Subin cries with joy. She finally escaped another disaster. The next day Subin enters the palace. She only does one thing. She looks like she is smiling like a flower. But this is her most aggrieved day. The throne that should belong to her son. She can only force herself to let the king abdicate to the crown prince. Everyone thinks she submitted, but walking out of the royal hall her eyes are full of tears, and she secretly vows she will take back this throne sooner or later. Maybe God has eyes. The chance comes soon. The king dies of illness and the crown prince succeeds. Subin enters the palace immediately asking the queen dowager who should be given the position of director of state funeral. The queen dowager is confused with the explanation of a court lady. She says, according to custom, it is given to the chief state counselor. This falls into Subin's trap again. Subin says the chief state counselor is young and weak. Which old minister would listen to him? The state funeral might be a mess. She suggests using the old minister, Han Mingho, as the director of state funeral. The queen dowager hesitates for a moment to avoid mistakes in the funeral. She agrees. Soon Chief State Counselor Prince Guizong and Minister of War Nam-e come to tell the Queen Dowager this absolutely cannot be done. The Director of State Funeral is not only responsible for the late king's funeral during the 3 years of the king's mourning, he is also responsible for all affairs in the court. The Queen Dowager knows she was tricked and changes her mind immediately. Subin expected such things would happen. She enters the palace again. The Queen Dowager says proudly, "You let Han Mingho be the director. Just want to monopolize power, right?" Subin replies calmly, "Such a thing doesn't exist at all. During the national mourning it is you who give orders. Every resolution in the court must go through your hands." The Queen Dowager doesn't understand politics and fears falling into a trap again. She doesn't speak immediately, but Subin already knows the Queen Dowager will eventually agree going out. She tells Han Mingho, in the 3 years as director, he only needs to do one thing. Eliminate all close associates of Chief State Counselor Prince Guizong. At this time the Queen Dowager calls her brother, asking if what Subin said before is credible. After getting a positive answer, she really gives the position of director to Han Mingho. Again getting the news, Minister of War Nam-e knows things are bad. He advises the Chief State Counselor to take advantage of having power now to deal with Han Mingho and other old ministers decisively. But the Chief State Counselor hesitates. He can't deal with ministers without a decree. Nam-e goes out angrily. His subordinate Yu Jiaguang sees Nam-ye's state. He knows the last chance has been missed. Yu Jiaguang is illegitimate and his career is extremely bumpy. Having climbed to this position with difficulty, he doesn't want to lose it. So he changes sides immediately and joins Han Mingho and brings Han Mingho a poem by Nam-e. The last 2 lines write, "A man at 20 has not pacified the country. Who will call him a great man in later generations?" Han Mingho doesn't understand the meaning. Yu Jiaguang changes pacified the country to obtain the country. Han Mingho is shocked, and the two meet the king immediately. The king looks at the altered poem and feels it is making a fuss over nothing. How can this be casually determined as rebellion? But Yu Jiaguang says at this time that when Nam Yi showed him the poem, he said, Chief State Counselor, Prince Guizong, as a royal member, also has the qualification to be king, and he prepares to push Prince Guizong to the throne. But Prince Guizong is indecisive. Eventually, he wants to change this Li dynasty to a Nam dynasty. The king is extremely agitated hearing this. Seeing this is said by Nam Yi's confidant Yu Jiaguang. He immediately orders Nam Yi's group to be imprisoned. Nam Yi is arrogant and does not care about details. Knowing he is lost, he admits he indeed had rebellious remarks. 30 people are beheaded in this incident. Chief State Counselor Prince Guizong, under the pleading of his father, Grand Prince Imyong. Chief State Counselor Prince Guizong, under the pleading of his father, Grand Prince Imyong, was able to save his life. But Grand Prince Imyong, from then on, is full of resentment towards Han Mingho and Su Bin's group. Without the restraint of the late king, in the palace and the court, Su Bin finds almost no equal opponent. Next, she wants to make the king completely convinced by her laying the last brick for her son to become king. This most filial king has been kneeling in front of the late king's spirit tablet for half a year. At this time his sister-in-law walks in. She asks a servant to bring a basin of water. She unties the gauze on the king's feet full of frostbite. While the king looks shy, Su Bin wipes these feet with eyes full of distress. At this moment, she even feels she shouldn't think of snatching this honest man's throne. Coming back to her senses, she immediately puts away her pity. This is just a play to gain the king's trust. She must do it perfectly. Applying medicine, wrapping gauze. Every step is meticulous. The king is really moved and tears drop down. Su Bin pauses for a moment. A smile flashes across her mouth. This matter reaches the ears of the king's mother, the Queen Dowager. When everyone else thinks this is a sign of royal harmony, only the Queen Dowager knows. Su Bin is not just simply distressed for the king. Indeed, a few days later the king comes to visit the Queen Dowager. He suggests his mother put down prejudice. Let the sister-in-law help her handle political affairs, because the king is in the mourning period. Political affairs are handled by the Queen Dowager, but the Queen Dowager is illiterate and already in a rush. With the king's mediation, Su Bin and the Queen Dowager, who never got along, reach a difficult consensus at this moment. During the time Su Bin governs, everything becomes orderly. The Queen Dowager, who has been guarding against Su Bin monopolizing power, doesn't find any overstepping behavior from Su Bin. Because Su Bin knows it is not the time yet, she is still trying her best to gain the king's trust. 3 months later, the king prepares to title Su Bin's 2 sons as grand princes. Su Bin asks the king to withdraw the order. After knowing it, the king says it is because he feels he owes his late brother that he made this decision. Speaking of this, Su Bin's eyes are full of tears again. She tells the king that titling them this way messes up the royal etiquette. Only your legitimate son can be titled Grand Prince. Only then will he have the chance to inherit the throne in the future. But the king says, your 2 sons also have the qualification to inherit the throne, because this throne should have belonged to my brother. Su Bin finally gets the answer she wanted. In the king's sincere eyes she can't see a bit of falsehood. She even feels she is too unscrupulous. The drafted decree is sent to the Queen Dowager for stamping. Since it is the king's will, the Queen Dowager can only agree. After this period, Su Bin resigns to the Queen Dowager. She is ready to leave the palace and return home. But when she walks out of the room, the Queen Dowager has already started complaining inside, saying, Su Bin has too much desire. No matter what, she shouldn't accept the king's titles for her sons. She doesn't care at all that Su Bin can hear, because she just wants to slap Su Bin's face. Su Bin doesn't care about the Queen Dowager's words at all. She got what she wanted. Back at the residence, the first person her sister lets Su Bin see is, surprisingly, the maid Song-yi. During her time in the palace to make Prince Jalsan become an adult, the sister actually let Song-yi comfort Prince Jalsan to sleep like when he was small. The AKT this time the sister also says, since the daughter-in-law is in poor health, why not let Prince Jalsan take Song-yi as a concubine? Maybe she can give you a grandson? Song-yi listens outside with a heart full of joy. Immediately feeling like a lady, Su Bin just complains about her sister making decisions on her own to let Song-yi sleep with Prince Jalsan. She doesn't have much dissatisfaction with this matter at the moment because in her heart, servants like Song-yi are countless. These people are not worthy for her to deal with personally. A few days later, the The maid accompanies the little prince to enter the palace to visit grandmother Queen Dowager. With the maid's propaganda, everyone knows she received the little prince's favor. At this moment, everyone is just envious. She might become the little prince's concubine. But the maid's idea doesn't stop there. She wants to be the main wife. Surprisingly, when she and the little prince return home, the little prince's sickly wife just returns from her parents' home. She is so scared she drops bowls and plates all over the floor. But she is still unwilling to give up. Listening to Prince Jalson and his wife being affectionate outside, she comes in with the bowls and plates regardless and sits down rudely. Prince Jalson is shocked. This is declaring sovereignty to the young lady. Luckily, another servant pulls her out, telling her to face reality. But Song Yi's love, wrapped in desire for power, has already blinded her eyes. That night, when Grand Prince Jalson sneaks to her room, asking Song Yi to lull him to sleep again, Song Yi is overjoyed. Regardless if Prince Jalson loves her or just has a motherly dependence, she has already captured him. Also on this night, the young king in the palace dies suddenly. This event changes Song Yi's fate profoundly again, because the king's son, Grand Prince John, is only 3 years old. Whether to push Grand Prince John to the throne or her other two grandsons, Grand Prince Wulsan or Grand Prince Jalson, becomes a difficult problem in front of the Queen Dowager. She seals the news of the king's death first, then asks someone to summon Prince Jalson's mother, Su Bin, to the palace. The Queen Dowager and Su Bin have always been at odds over the heir issue. Summoning her to the palace in the middle of the night, the sister tells Su Bin never to go. This must be the Queen Dowager clearing obstacles for Grand Prince John. Su Bin disagrees. She has arranged things in the palace and court for so long, just waiting for today. She bets. The Queen Dowager dares not act under layers of escort. Su Bin enters the palace smoothly. Assassins from the opposing faction didn't dare to act rashly on the way. Looking at the king who died with eyes open, she says she will definitely protect Grand Prince John. Then she comes to the Queen Dowager's hall. The Queen Dowager doesn't beat around the bush. She cannot let Grand Prince John succeed because back then she used the excuse of being too young not to let Grand Prince Wulsan inherit the position of grandson. She cannot leave an excuse for people this time. This time she advocates letting Su Bin's eldest son, Grand Prince Wulsan, succeed, but Su Bin disagrees. Su Bin hopes her younger son, Grand Prince Jalson, succeeds. The two fail to reach an agreement. Again, a silent contest begins. Suddenly, Court Lady Park whispers a few words in the Queen Dowager's ear. The Queen Dowager realizes and agrees to let Grand Prince Jalson succeed. Getting the news, Su Bin cries with joy. From the moment she was kicked out of the palace over 10 years ago, she planned every step carefully, walking on thin ice. After several life and death struggles, hands covered in blood, finally got the result she wanted. Immersed in joy, she completely fails to realize the Grand Queen Dowager has dug a big pit for her. During the first curtain hearing, the Grand Queen Dowager actively hands power to Su Bin. After some debate, the ministers below also agree that Su Bin will listen to politics from behind the curtain. Just when Su Bin is happy, the current king's grandfather, Grand Prince Imyong, suddenly rushes into the court saying it is against etiquette. The Grand Queen Dowager steps down. The Queen Dowager should listen to politics. Only the wife of the late king is the Queen Dowager. Su Bin is not. She was never titled queen. How can she be Queen Dowager? This leaves the ministers speechless. Su Bin didn't expect her mother-in-law, whom she always crushed, could come up with this method in her own room. She can hear her mother-in-law's proud laughter. That night, due to status issues, Su Bin is kicked out of the palace again. This is a woman who wants to be queen. Today her chance finally comes. Hearing the court ladies say the king doesn't eat or drink because he misses his mother, she tells the court lady with tears in her eyes she always took care of the king in the private house. The relationship between the two has long surpassed master and servant. She has a way to make the king stop missing his mother. The court lady brings this news to the king's grandmother, the Grand Queen Dowager. Hearing someone can alienate the king and his mother, the Grand Queen Dowager is overjoyed. This might be another chance for her to bring down her daughter-in-law. So she asks Court Lady Park to bring the woman into the palace. Seeing Song Yi for the first time, the Grand Queen Dowager asks Song Yi how is her relationship with the king's mother. Su Bin Song Yi is truly full of schemes. Before speaking, she starts crying as if wronged, saying Su Bin doesn't treat a servant like her as a human. The Grand Queen Dowager is happy. She likes people who hate her daughter-in-law Su-bin. So she immediately sends Song-yi to the king. The king really falls for Song-yi's trick. Under Song-yi's service, his appetite opens up. The two are together almost day and night, borrowing the king's favor. Song-yi's desire gradually expands. Disliking that the hall court lady park assigned to her is too far from the king, she gives the eunuch a slap. She sits rudely in front of court lady park, using the king to threaten court lady park to give her a hall closer to the royal hall out the door. Her former companion advises her making trouble like this might bring retaliation. But Song-yi has her own theory. When everyone knows I slapped the eunuch, everyone will bow to me. But before that day comes, she gets news. Su-bin and the king's wife, the queen, are entering the palace. She panics for a moment. Suddenly she remembers her former teacher, Court Lady Choi, using the same trick. Tears in eyes, acting pitiful, Court Lady Choi falls for it. Under Song-yi's arrangement, as an experienced person in the palace, Court Lady Choi moves between eunuchs and maids with only two goals. First, continue to alienate the Grand Queen Dowager and Lady Su-bin. Second, don't let any beautiful maids get close to the king. A few days later, under the minister's operation, the Grand Queen Dowager finally agrees to let Su-bin and the queen enter the palace. But when the king sees his wife, the queen, he only glances back once and goes straight to find his mother, Su-bin. Song-yi stands on the steps smiling. In the fight with the queen she wins almost effortlessly, but her future mother-in-law, Su-bin, is not so easy to deal with. At this moment Su-bin sits in a separate palace far from the main hall waiting for her son to bow. Good education from childhood makes the king very filial. He respects and loves his mother. The Grand Queen Dowager fears exactly this, so she arranged Su-bin in a separate palace and restricted the number of times the king visits. The king can only sneak to visit the separate palace while going to Song-yi's place late at night. This also alerts Song-yi before Su-bin controls the harem. She must become an official concubine, so she stages a fake illness. The little king sees it and is extremely anxious and at a loss, staying with Song-yi all night, while Su-bin waits for the king all night. The next day Su-bin comes to find the king. One look at Song-yi. She understands what happened. She changes strategy temporarily and goes to soften up to the Grand Queen Dowager, asking the Grand Queen Dowager to let her return to the main palace. This really surprises the Grand Queen Dowager. The always arrogant daughter-in-law pleads in front of everyone. An inexplicable pleasure rises. The Grand Queen Dowager agrees to Su-bin's request. Getting the news, Song-yi turns pale. This is obviously to fight her for the king. As a maid she has no chance of winning. But at this time the Grand Queen Dowager also has her own plan. She thinks to alienate the king and Su-bin. Only a woman can be relied on, so she organizes to choose concubines for the king. Today is the day the king chooses concubines. But she is not on the list because she was born of a concubine. This lowly status prevents her from being selected. How can she be willing to lose at this last moment? She runs home immediately and sees her mother and brother enjoying the money she traded her body for. She frantically tells her mother to grab the family tree back from the main house. She wants to change the record on it. But these two are useless. Days pass with no action. Song-yi can't wait and leaves the palace again, going straight to the main house asking her half-brother for the family tree. And scrupulous threats make the brother give in. He hands over the family tree. With this, she is successfully listed. Plus, the Grand Queen Dowager has always wanted to rely on her to win over the king. After some maneuvering, Song-yi and another noble lady are titled Lady Sugui together. The king chooses her that night, but she plays hard to get, saying she cannot serve the king without greeting the queen first. This makes the young king immediately feel Song-yi is a person who knows propriety. But actually Song-yi is not satisfied with being just a Lady Sugui. She wants to replace the king's main wife, the queen. At this time the queen is recovering at her parents' home. The next day Song-yi pretends to visit, actually to check on the queen's illness. Seeing the queen coughing blood, she smiles. The matter of Song-yi leaving the palace is known by the king's mother, Lady Insu. The lady knows Song-yi has bad intentions, so she questions the king why he let her leave the palace unexpectedly. The always filial king contradicts his mother for Song-yi. This makes Insu so angry she can't stand steadily outside. She looks up and laughs. She pushed her son to the throne with her own hands. Unexpectedly her son lost his original intention so quickly. At night Song-yi returns being sharp. She knows continuing like this will make Insu turn the spearhead from the Grand Queen Dowager to herself. So, using filial piety as a reason, she asks the king to apologize to his mother. The king comes outside his mother's palace. Insu gives him no chance and turns off the light directly. The next day the king passes Insu's palace gate again. He walks straight past it, seeing the discord between Insu and her son. This makes the Grand Queen Dowager very happy. But Song-yi is more worried. She doesn't know what move Lady Insu will make. The next day she goes to greet the Grand Queen Dowager as usual. She sees the queen and the king walking together. Jealousy rushes to her heart immediately. Is this Lady Insu's way to suppress her? But Song-yi is not convinced. She makes 2 preparations to make the queen die faster. She uses witchcraft, ordering her mother to find someone in the mountains to curse the queen, at the same time asking court Lady Choi to bury a doll in the queen's palace on the other side. To ease the relationship with Lady Insu, she persuades the king with filial piety again. This time, at the court meeting, he must propose to the ministers to let his father's spirit tablet enter the royal ancestral shrine. Only then can his mother be honored as Queen Dowager. The king doesn't know. This is a power struggle between women. He feels Song-yi is understanding and is moved to tears. At the court meeting, the king doesn't care about the Grand Queen Dowager's obstruction at all. With the support of old ministers, his father is posthumously titled king. Lady Insu is also honored as Queen Dowager. Queen Insu is very satisfied with this result. Song-yi's pressure decreases suddenly not long after the queen passes away. 5 years later, the young king reaches the age to rule personally. The matter of appointing a new queen is put on the agenda. If Song-yi wants to rise under Queen Insu's obstruction, she must give birth to a son. The woman serves the king every day but can't give birth to a son at this time. A court lady tells her a folk remedy. Find a family that has given birth to many sons. Steal their kitchen knife, then forge it into a small axe and hang it at the waist. Looking at the small axe, the woman feels like she found a treasure. This method really works. The woman soon has morning sickness. She is really pregnant with a royal child. Having confidence, the woman goes to the Grand Queen Dowager immediately. She wants to put on a show. First she says nothing, then starts crying. When the Grand Queen Dowager asks, she says tearfully, her mother-in-law, Queen Insu, doesn't like her. Now that she is pregnant and favored, who knows what her mother-in-law will do to her? This hits the Grand Queen Dowager's spot exactly. She has been jealous of and suppressing her daughter-in-law Insu all her life. She won't let it go this time either. So she promises Song-yi she will push her to the position of queen. So Insu can't handle her easily. But the Grand Queen Dowager also has a condition. Song-yi, it must continue to alienate Insu and the king. This is a piece of cake for Song-yi. Their alliance is reached. The news reaches Insu's ears quickly. Because of Song-yi, Insu and the king have been at odds for years. Now they even want to make this person she despises the most. The Queen Insu can't suppress the anger in her heart. She leaves the palace overnight to find the old minister, Han Mingho. To knock down the Grand Queen Dowager's arrogance, Han Mingho takes out a list of officials. Almost all important positions in the court are in the hands of the Grand Queen Dowager's relatives. It's not impossible to seize power, but it will definitely involve bloodshed. It will definitely make the king, like King Sejong, become a ruthless person who kills his closest relatives and be criticized by future generations forever. Insu, who loves her son more than herself, says with tears of blood, Lord Sangdang, you are truly the Zhang Liang of King Sejong. You are truly the Zhang Liang of King Sejong. From then on, Insu adjusts her mindset, waiting silently for the opportunity. She summons her daughter-in-law, Song-yi, and gives her a prenatal education manual. But Song-yi changes her expression, thinking this is her mother-in-law Insu, mocking her illiteracy. She leaves without even taking the book. The court lady aside asks if she should send the book. Insu says, forget about her. Even if she follows the rules for prenatal education, can a flood dragon become a real dragon? Unexpectedly, Insu's words come true. Song-yi's son eventually becomes the most famous tyrant in Joseon history and is kicked off the throne halfway. But at this time Song-yi hears these words. She has only one thought in her mind, war with Insu at all costs. A few days later she passes these words to the Grand Queen Dowager and says she has become a thorn in Insu's eye. If she doesn't become queen, her life might be in danger any time. The Grand Queen Dowager wants to alienate Insu and the king and cannot lose this powerful helper. So she agrees to the matter. That night Song-yi goes to the royal hall to bewitch the king again. The king falls into the trap. He goes to find his mother, Queen Insu, personally requesting to title Song-yi as the queen. Some things cannot be stopped. Some things cannot be stopped. This time Insu does not stop it. This time Insu does not stop it. But how could she not use such a good negotiating condition? Early the next morning Insu goes to the Grand Queen Dowager. Immediately, as a condition for titling Song-yi as queen, she asks the Grand Queen Dowager's brother to resign as right state counselor. Weighing the pros and cons, the Grand Queen Dowager agrees. Song-yi ascends to the position of queen smoothly. Song-yi who gains power. At this moment nothing can suppress her jealous heart anymore. Concubines are waiting to serve the king. But the king sets his eyes on this maid, every inch of her skin washed clean. She is sent to the king's sleeping quarters. The queen learns about this quickly. The jealous queen comes to the royal hall early the next morning with her bewitchment. She asks for the maid who served last night to be brought to her. The first sentence she asks is whether the king possessed her last night. The maid's panicked expression makes the queen understand everything. She calls the maid to massage her legs from morning till night, that looking at the maid, she unconsciously imagines the scene of her serving the king. Then she slaps her. Even so, she doesn't feel relieved. She thinks of another way. She asks her father-in-law, father, to set fire outside her hall. At the same time she makes the maid watch her sleep at night. The maid sees the fire and the sleeping queen. The maid doesn't know this is a trap. She hesitates whether to wake her up. Smoke slowly spreads in. The maid runs to the door looking around. Finally she comes back to wake the queen. This staged fire brings the king over. The queen pretends to faint at this moment. This trick works every time on the king. The king's distress for the queen increases. He stays with her all night. After gaining a wave of attention, she calls the maid asking where the maid was during the fire. The maid says she was with the queen all the time. But the queen says she woke up from the smoke once and seemed not to see anyone. The maid kneels quickly to beg for mercy. But the queen's heart is already wrapped in jealousy. She says coldly, "You don't want me to live, so I can only make you die?" A few days later the queen goes into labor. She sends the maid a last look. The labor lasts until night. The king comes personally. Accidentally he sees the maid standing aside. The maid, with tears in her eyes, bows deeply to him. This is her last straw. But the king is attracted by the queen screaming. How the maid wishes the king would turn his head again. But she doesn't wait for that moment. When the king turns again, the maid is gone. The confused king thinks only for a moment before being caught by the queen's voice again. And at this time the maid has reached the end of her life. At the moment the baby cries. She ends her life with a white silk cloth, a life as if she had never been here. The queen, who gave birth to a son, becomes even more arrogant. According to custom, she needs to greet her mother-in-law, Queen Insu, daily, but using illness as an excuse, she only goes to the Grand Queen Dowager, not Queen Insu. Even sitting on the sedan, she shows a proud and arrogant expression to other concubines. She just wants these concubines to complain to her mother-in-law, Queen Insu. But she underestimated Queen Insu. After all, Queen Insu comes to see her that night and gives the queen a book of internal instructions she wrote herself. This book teaches concubines how to be a good royal wife. But what the queen thinks of is her mother-in-law humiliating her for being illiterate again. So she falls asleep while her mother-in-law reads to her. As soon as her mother-in-law leaves, she laughs loudly thinking she won another round, not caring at all that her mother-in-law outside hears it. Court Lady Choi advises her not to always be enemies with Queen Insu. But she tells Court Lady Choi a story she heard from the king saying, Queen Insu hoped the king would handle politics her way. The king disliked it very much because of the mother-son relationship. The king didn't refute at that time, but in the end the king didn't handle politics according to Queen Insu's ideas. Instead he appointed new officials directly and carried out drastic reforms. So she judges the king already detests his mother, Queen Insu. Now the king dotes on her. She wants to use this time to make mother and son break completely. The next day, she goes to greet her mother-in-law. Reaching the door, she turns around and goes straight to the king, making a false accusation that her mother-in-law refuses her greeting. The king asks why she refused. The queen lowers her head and starts crying immediately. She waits for the king to ask further. The king takes the bait. The queen says through tears that she receives the king's favor. Only then could she change from a maid to the queen. It is also because of this. Queen Insu thinks a slave is lowly, so she doesn't accept the greeting. Seeing the king furious, the queen says she can endure this grievance. Please don't hurt the harmony between mother and son because of this. Back at the queen's palace court, Lady Choi advises her she shouldn't have lied to the king today. What if the king finds out the truth later? The queen says, the king dotes on me as long as I insist. Insu refused the greeting. Does it matter what Insu says? As she said, Insu learns about this quickly, but she doesn't go to argue with the king. She just smiles and advises people around her to stay calm. Seeing Insu silent, the ministers feel the queen is gaining power and immediately side with the queen. Under the queen's instruction, several ministers submit petitions to impeach Insu's old minister, Han Mingho, but they can't find any leverage. So they make up a random reason saying Han Mingho accepted 10 bags of rice to help someone get a magistrate position. It is obvious this is fake. How could a minister of 3 reigns bow for 10 bags of rice? The king scolds the royal secretary for not using his brain. But actually the petitioners just want to humiliate Han Mingho, to let the world know how worthless a minister is who accepts even 10 bags of rice. Insu also knows this. Quickly, she wants to demand justice for Han Mingho. She can't be slapped in the face like this. Han Mingho advises Insu to let it go. Such a small matter is not worth mentioning. But Insu can't tolerate it and goes to the king immediately. It is late at night, and the king is sleeping on his desk. Looking at the king's innocent face, Insu can't help remembering the moments with Prince Taowan. She struggled all her life just to realize Taowan's dream, making her son an independent and wise ruler. So Insu says nothing and leaves the royal hall with tears in her eyes. When she returns, it is already dawn. Han Mingho fell asleep, sitting, waking up and learning. Insu said nothing to the king. He chuckles. This is exactly the result he wanted. Going out, he comes to the royal hall. Before entering, he hears the young officials inside mocking him as the 10 bags of rice minister. When he enters, they all become respectful again. He asks the young officials to sit down to talk about the 10 bags of rice minister together. The young officials are scared and retreat, stuttering. At this time Han Mingho changes his expression and says to the king, reconcile with Queen Insu. Relying only on the young officials just now, you cannot complete your dream of reform. You need Queen Insu's help. This is a fact the king doesn't want to admit. Han Mingho continues to shout hoarsely, throwing out all of Insu's forbearance over the years, even including watching over the king all night last night and going back silently. He asks the king if he doesn't choose Insu as a helper, who else can protect the king like Insu? The king is moved to tears by the words. That night he goes to his mother to apologize. How could a mother hold a grudge against her son? The two hug and cry and have dinner together. But the queen learns of this and gets jealous again. Anger rises from her heart. She wants to ruin the reunion of mother and son. Court Lady Choi stops her and says, never go. She pushes Court Lady Choi down. Court Lady Choi still grabs her, saying, if you go to Insu's palace tonight, you will spend this life in tears of blood. The woman is already crazy. She kicks Court Lady Choi away. She just wants to see tonight if the king loves her or loves his mother. Then she orders people to drag the blocking Court Lady Choi out and beat her. The queen's sedan moves rapidly towards Insu's palace. Court Lady Choi is still thinking for the queen at this moment. She arranges a maid to find eunuch Tian to stop the queen. The king sleeps with his mother like when he was a child. The maid arrives at Insu's palace door explaining the situation to eunuch Tian. The court lady aside says, leave it alone. This is the queen seeking her own death. But eunuch Tian can't bear to see the king in a dilemma. He runs hurriedly to stop the sedan. Even so, the queen still refuses to stop eunuch Tian, kneels, and advises with his life. Only then does the crazy queen regain her reason. The next day she breaks into the royal hall without scruples. The king is handling political affairs. Seeing such lack of rules, the king doesn't give her a good face. The queen goes back angrily. Only now does she remember Court Lady Choi. But Court Lady Choi has been beaten to her last breath. The queen doesn't go to visit. Instead, she summons her mother and brother asking them to win over ministers to fight Queen Insu. She must win. Court Lady Choi drags her last breath. Coming to the queen's palace door, she says trembling, never fight with Queen Insu again. Then she passes away. Queen Insu learns of this and is furious. The queen was raised by Court Lady Choi. Single-handedly, she goes to the king immediately requesting to depose the queen. The king calls out, Mother. Insu says bluntly, if the queen has no virtue, the country will perish. The king is stunned. Insu tells the story to protect the queen. The king pretends to be calm, asking his mother to go back. First he will call the queen to educate her. Seeing the king's ambiguous attitude, Insu can only educate the queen personally. After a night of thinking, she believes the queen is so arrogant because she has the king's favor and gave birth to the first prince, Wonja. So Insu asks someone to bring the first prince and gives him to her eldest daughter-in-law to raise outside the palace. Knowing this, the queen rushes into the royal hall regardless of dignity, again lying on the ground, asking the king to decide for her. The king dismisses the ministers, scolding the queen for breaking into the hall repeatedly. The queen contradicts the king on the spot, then complains that Insu took her son away. The king has no choice at this moment. Matters of the harem should indeed be decided by his mother. The queen goes to beg Insu, breaking in again. Insu has waited for this moment for a long time. She tells the queen, "Don't expect to see the first prince for 2 or 3 years. Seeing Insu doesn't relent. The queen places her hope on the king, again starting a hunger strike. So the king goes to beg his mother. But Insu is determined to control the queen. This time she still doesn't relent. The king walks to the queen's palace and thinks for a moment, deciding not to go in. The queen's hope is shattered again, but she still doesn't realize it is her mistake. Instead, she thinks the king has changed his heart. Thinking for a moment, she thinks royal concubine Zhang seduced the king. Otherwise, how could concubine Zhang become pregnant? Crazy. She calls her mother to her. She asks her mother to bring some arsenic into the palace. She wants to kill concubine Zhang. Her mother is too scared to speak. But a few days later she brings the arsenic, as requested. This arsenic is not for concubine Zhang, but for herself to eat. She also prepares dolls and talismans, asking a little maid to bury them under her palace. Just as the little maid buries them, the king comes. She rushes to report to the queen. The queen has no time to take the poison. She hurriedly stuffs the talismans and poison under the cabinet, but it is too obvious. She asks her mother to sit there to block it. The king comes in saying he wants to sleep here. The queen says hurriedly she needs to tidy up. She forces the king to the side room, but unexpectedly the king comes back just in time to see the two in panic. The king sits down and asks what they are hiding. The queen suddenly has a plan. She turns to sit opposite the king and hands over the poison, saying, because her mother-in-law doesn't like her, so she asked her mother to prepare poison. Only if she dies will her mother-in-law not direct her dislike to the first prince. She starts crying while speaking. She can't let the buried dolls go to waste. So she says to the king again, just because my mother-in-law dislikes me, other concubines keep using witchcraft to harm me. This trick really works on the king. The king orders digging at the queen's palace, easily finding those dolls. The next day the king summons the chief state counselor to investigate this strictly. Queen Insu rushes in directly, saying strict investigation is needed, but not investigating other concubines, but investigating the queen. She says the queen carries poison with her. What if she intends to harm your majesty? We cannot let this go. But the king is still speaking for the queen. The queen says she wants to commit suicide with poison. Do you believe this, your majesty? She relies on tears and hypocrisy to win your sympathy to sit on the throne of the queen. How could she commit suicide? Then Insu defines this matter as intent to kill the king. The king says this is just a family matter. Insu waits for this sentence and says immediately, since it is a family matter, let me the parent handle it. Then she orders the arrest and torture of the queen's family and surrounds the queen's palace tightly. Hearing this, the Grand Queen Dowager wants to decide for the queen. She orders the inspector court lady to search all the other concubines' halls. 2 pairs of mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, 3 women, turn the whole palace into chaos. Insu sees the Grand Queen Dowager wants to intervene, so she comes over and asks her subordinate to present a book. Inside are records of corruption of the Grand Queen Dowager's family in the court. Queen Insu had people investigate secretly for a long time just to checkmate her mother-in-law. Today, as a condition, she asks her mother-in-law not to interfere with her punishing the queen. Then she gets up and leaves the confined. Queen is still crazy and starts faking illness. She doesn't let the doctor in, insisting on the king coming. She guesses the king's mind thoroughly. The king is indeed very panicked. But before he gets up, Insu comes to the royal hall first. She asks the king to depose the queen, but the king refuses. Insu says since she can't control this daughter-in-law, she has no face to stay in the palace. She gets up to leave the palace to live elsewhere. The king panics too, begging his mother to stay. He doesn't want to be an unfilial son. Insu gives no comment. The queen on the other side also hears the news of Insu leaving the palace. She knows the king will definitely go to persuade Insu. So she kneels in front of Insu's palace early to apologize. At night the king comes indeed just in time to see the queen apologizing, but Insu ignores her completely and turns off the light directly. This makes the king sympathize with the queen even more. The next day the ministers come up with a clever plan for the king. Demote the queen to a concubine first, then reinstate her as queen after a while. This satisfies Insu's request and calms the matter down. The king does so, but just one day later a minister submits a petition to reinstate the queen immediately. Insu knows she was fooled by her son, but just laughs loudly. She knows the reinstated queen will definitely be more arrogant. She will wait for the queen to make a mistake. Indeed, to consolidate her position. The queen prepares to make the pregnant concubine Zhang miscarry not long after concubine Zhang really miscarries. Knowing this, the king is furious and orders a thorough investigation. Doctors and nurses of the royal clinic are all taken away. The queen's mother is worried, but the queen, deeply favored by the king, says, "Let him investigate. Can His Majesty kill me soon?" The king finds a clue here. The queen's brother once found a nurse to prepare a special tea that might cause miscarriage. The king orders the nurse to be arrested, but the queen acts faster, having her brother silence the nurse. Although the king loses the evidence, suspicion of the queen has begun. So he goes to the queen's palace. He says the queen has changed, but the queen says it is the king who changed. The king used to love only her, but now he has many wives and concubines. She cannot stand the king holding other women. The queen's jealous nature is completely exposed. Holding the last hope, the king wants to ask if the queen did the thing to concubine Zhang. But before he speaks, the queen points the finger at Queen Insu. "It must be Queen Insu who told you that I harmed concubine Zhang. Mother didn't say it. Who else, if not her mother, is not a person who speaks ill behind backs?" The queen's irresponsible speech and casual accusation make the king furious. But the queen still has no remorse, continuing to quarrel with the king. The king finally can't bear it anymore. He warns the queen, "If you want to keep the position of queen, behave yourself." The queen feels the crisis only at this moment. She grabs the king's clothes immediately, crying and begging the king not to abandon her. The king becomes soft-hearted but still turns to leave. The mother comes in and tells the queen the king has left. The queen changes her face in a second, asking her mother to ask whose sleeping quarters the king goes to tonight. She wants to kill all these women. Her mother advises her to let it go, but the queen says confidently, "His Majesty won't abandon me, otherwise he would have done so long ago." The king indeed won't abandon her, but her mother-in-law, Queen Insu, may not. The first thing Insu does after returning from recuperation outside is asking the king not to intervene in concubine Zhang's matter anymore. She will take full responsibility. Knowing he didn't handle it well, the king can only agree. Insu orders a secret investigation immediately, but at this moment the queen is pregnant. Again she becomes more arrogant and places her next target on Lady Yoon Suk-Ui, the concubine Insu likes most. She goes to find the king, proudly. The king, still angry, specifically asks the eunuch to stop her and orders her to go back. But the queen breaks into the royal hall directly, scolding the king why he didn't post a notice. "Queen and dogs not allowed." The king is so angry his lips tremble, saying directly, he will have the queen dragged out. The queen touches her belly, showing her madness again. She tells the child in her belly to watch clearly, let him see how his father has him dragged out, saying again, "You have made me unbearable." She questions if the king wants to hit his concubine with that, even provoking the king to smash it down. The king slams the door and leaves in anger. The queen suddenly feels abdominal pain. She miscarries. This makes the queen more sensitive and crazy learning. The king visits Lady Yoon Suk-Ui tonight. The queen rushes over directly. The king is angry to the peak, but the queen still doesn't care and drives the concubine out. Considering the last bit of affection, the king pulls the queen up to let her go back. But the crazy queen refuses to leave. 2 scratch marks appear on the king's face. Scratching the dragon face is a capital crime. The queen finally realizes the seriousness of the problem. She apologizes to the king hurriedly. The king pushes her down, covering his face. He runs out. Then the queen comes out. She warns everyone present. If anyone speaks of today's matter, she will not spare them. The king also issues a gag order the next day forbidding palace people to spread this matter, especially not letting Queen Insu know. Getting the news, the queen thinks the king still protects her. Nothing will happen. This time the king indeed protects her. He finds ministers immediately to discuss how to save the queen. The ministers tell the king the only way to save the queen is to depose her. Otherwise, if Queen Insu knows, she will definitely order the queen's death. The king is shocked. He thought the worst was just deposition, didn't expect it would be death. He can't decide for a moment. But at this time the queen makes another mistake. She thinks she is smart and goes to apologize to Insu, saying last night, when she helped the king out, the king accidentally hit the door and hurt a small spot on his face, blaming herself for not serving well. Insu doesn't ask much and believes her for now. The queen thinks the king's gag order plus her made-up story can fool Insu. But unexpectedly Insu knows her son is injured and goes to the main hall immediately. The king thinks his mother doesn't know, turning sideways trying to fool his mother away. But his mother insists on seeing his wound. The king turns his head helplessly. Insu sees at a glance that these are scratch marks. The king hurriedly speaks for the queen, but Insu doesn't care, asking to depose the queen immediately and give her poison. The king calls mother helplessly. Insu questions if he can't do it, saying since so she will do it personally. Insu does what she says and finds the chief state counselor immediately, asking him to guide the officials to facilitate this. At the court meeting everyone is very troubled. If they disagree with deposition, they offend Insu. If they agree, they fear when the first prince succeeds later he will take revenge for his mother. Finally, the ministers argue for a while and kick the ball back to the king to decide. The queen is very happy to get this news. She knows the king will definitely side with her. Plus, she is the mother of the first prince. Insu is still afraid of this point. Then she says arrogantly, "Report the list of ministers who advocated deposition. I will deal with them slowly later." But this time she can't wait for later. Insu sits in the royal hall all night asking the king to make a decision. Seeing the king hesitating, Insu puts on a "it's either her or me" attitude and gets up to leave helpless. The king stops Insu and proposes a condition after deposition. If the queen changes, allow her to enter the palace to raise the first prince. Insu gives no comment, ordering people to draft the decree to depose the queen immediately. Then she gets up and leaves that night. She orders the inspector, court lady, to kick the queen out of the palace. The queen pulls out a small knife, threatening to see the king once. At this last moment the queen fails to keep her dignity. The king sends someone to pass a message asking the queen to wait quietly outside the palace. The queen's last hope is shattered, going out. She tells the court lady to tell the first prince how his mother was kicked out of the palace, asking the first prince to avenge her. These three concubines all want to be the queen, but the mother-in-law doesn't even look at them. Instead, she asks the age of another plain-looking girl. Knowing she is only 18, Insu smiles and nods. A concubine aside, whispers to concubine Zhang, the girl will become the queen. But concubine Zhang doesn't panic at all because she has a secret weapon. A few days later, Insu summons them one by one. Concubine Zhang is the third to enter. She tells Insu she is pregnant. She will definitely give birth to a son this time. Little does she know, this is exactly the reason Insu doesn't choose her. The fourth to enter is exactly that girl. Insu doesn't waste words and asks her to be the queen directly. The girl is very confused because she is the weakest in both rank and background. Insu tells the reason at this time. Because the girl is young and has no children. After she becomes queen, she will raise the deposed queen's son with all her heart. The girl accepts this condition and takes over the custody of the first prince. The deposed queen outside the palace becomes crazy again. Knowing this, she doesn't allow her son to be given to others, nor does she allow the king to be snatched by others. Her mother advises her to endure, saying there might be a chance to return to the palace. Indeed, not long after Insu sends a court lady to check the deposed queen's repentance, intending to bring her into the palace as a normal concubine. But because she made too many enemies back then. Before the court lady leaves the palace, some palace people in the name of the queen send the deposed queen a set of queen's clothes. The deposed queen wants to welcome guests with dignity. She puts them on without hesitation. When the court lady arrives, she is shocked seeing this outfit. Then a court lady says the king has an oral message. The deposed queen thinks she can return to the palace, But the court lady says the message is just to let them visit the deposed queen. This is obviously staged by the court lady to enrage the deposed queen. The deposed queen really falls for it, and her face turns gloomy. At this time a maid presents a box saying it is a gift from the queen. Actually, it is sent by concubine Zhang's group. The purpose is to enrage the deposed queen. The deposed queen opens the box. It is some gold and silver jewelry. She feels a great humiliation and asks to take it back. But the court lady orders her to accept it in the name of the queen. The deposed queen pushes the box down. Her uncontrollable character flares up again, still talking about the first prince and saying, as long as she doesn't die, sooner or later she will cause a bloodbath in the palace. This scene is reported exactly to Queen Insu's ears. Insu doesn't wait overnight and orders poison for the deposed queen. But on the other side the king refuses to agree. Insu rushes to the royal hall in the rain. Mother and son do not yield to each other. Insu says, if the deposed queen doesn't die, Insu says, if the deposed queen doesn't die in the future, when the first prince ascends the throne and the deposed queen is welcomed back, she will definitely stir the palace into eternal unrest. She gives the king two choices. Either keep the first prince and kill the deposed queen, or, implied choice, not fully stated in text likely, or keep deposed queen and lose prince/throne. After speaking, she turns to leave. The king stops his mother. He agrees to kill the deposed queen. This choice eventually creates the Joseon dynasty's most tyrannical king. The next day the Grand Queen Dowager, who fought with Insu all her life, runs out of oil and light. First, dies, immediately followed by the deposed queen. She leaves her last words, asking her mother to tell the first prince her death state today. Tell the first prince how she was persecuted by Insu. When the first prince ascends the throne, he must avenge her. Then she drinks the poison. Wait until the first prince grows up. Give this handkerchief to the first prince. This is his mother's blood. Within one day, Queen Insu's two most important opponents in her life all died. A gag order is also issued. In the palace no one is allowed to mention the matter of the deposed queen, just like this. More than 10 years later, the first prince ascends the throne. Perhaps inheriting from his mother, he is equally moody and extremely tyrannical. This little eunuch says he is willing to climb a mountain of swords and go into a sea of fire for the king. The king decides immediately to let him try, but there are no mountains of swords or seas of fire. So he asks for a rope, putting it around the little eunuch's neck. The king pulls it hard and gets more and more excited. Other eunuchs stand aside, daring not even to look. The little eunuch has only one breath left. Finally, the head eunuch can't stand it, begging the king from the side. Only then is the king satisfied. The next day his grandmother, Grand Queen Dowager Insu, knowing this, comes to find the king, asking if he loves playing so much. The king is scared and sweating, saying he will never do it again. His grandmother gives him 4 major tasks for governing the country, asking him to focus on these. The king agrees hurriedly. But when his grandmother leaves the door, seeing his grandmother talking and laughing with his brother, Prince Jinseong, the king changes his appearance again. He already knows he is not born of the queen, the current queen, Insu's choice. His brother, Prince Jinseong, is so jealousy and panic strike immediately, he starts to investigate his biological mother. This matter is reported to Insu by ministers soon. Insu confidently believes, as long as she is alive. Even if he finds out, what can the king do? Insu's indulgence makes the king closer and closer to the truth. His character also becomes more and more tyrannical. Finally, one day he summons his father-in-law and brother-in-law, forcing them to ask the reason his mother was given poison. After learning his mother was given poison for scratching the dragon face, his anger does not subside. Instead, he thinks, because he has the blood of a sinner mother flowing in him, so his grandmother doesn't like him. To verify his grandmother's attitude towards him, he asks ministers to submit a petition to rehabilitate his mother. If his grandmother agrees, then it proves his grandmother acknowledges his imperial body. If his grandmother disagrees, then he is forever a sinner's son. His grandmother can depose him and set up a new king anytime. At the same time, to keep the throne he must go to war with his grandmother. The petition is presented. Insu knows it is the king testing. But still does not agree that she wants to see what the king can do. The king, indeed, does not explode at the court meeting but has made up his mind to war with his grandmother. But at this time the court officials all listen to his grandmother. He must establish his own dignity. So the first axe falls on the Confucian scholars. Under the suggestion of treacherous officials, the king reads the history books of this dynasty, which he shouldn't read. Inside he finds words describing King Sejong's usurpation. He knows these are also what his grandmother cannot tolerate. So he immediately arrests the historians who compiled these books. Without interrogation, he beats them to death with a wooden stick. Personally, following that, he expands the scope and starts a guilt by association mechanism. More and more scholars are arrested. He makes ministers watch him execute scholars. Eventually, dozens are executed. Seeing the situation reaching an uncontrollable level, Insu decides to stop the king. But at this time the king has deterred the officials. The center of power is also gradually shifting from Insu to the king. Just that before the shift is complete, he still has to obey Insu like a puppy. Under Insu's request, the situation is controlled. Scholars on the edge of the event are also exempted from punishment. Insu finally tells the king if he wants to rehabilitate his mother, he must wait until she dies. But the king can't wait that long. The origin of the matter is Insu. He wants Insu to admit personally that his mother was innocent. Time flies to 6 years later. The king and Insu have reached a balance of power. The matter of rehabilitating his mother is put on the agenda again under the planning of treacherous officials. He meets his grandmother, maternal, at his mother's grave. Seeing the handkerchief stained with his mother's blood, he shouts to avenge his mother. The most tragic massacre in Joseon history begins. He takes the handkerchief to find his grandmother, Insu, asking his grandmother to admit his mother was wronged. His grandmother tells him, unless she dies, otherwise it is impossible to rehabilitate his mother. The crazy Yin Sangin overturns the table, hearing women's voices behind the screen. These are the two concubines who fought for favor with his mother. He drags them out and closes the palace gate. The crazy slaughter begins. He beats the two former concubines half to death first, then puts hoods on their heads, calls their sons, who are his half-brothers, saying, "Here are two rebels asking his brothers to beat them to death." The unknowing brothers, just like this, beat their mothers to death with their own hands. After dealing with this wave, Yin Sangin goes to find his grandmother again, asking his grandmother to admit his mother was wronged. He even puts a knife on his grandmother's neck. Queen Insu states strongly, "Kill me if you have the guts." Yin Sangin tells her to move away. This scene is recorded by history. Insu regrets listening to her son's advice back then, not deposing this grandson at this time. Yin Sangin opens the palace gate to let ministers in. Seeing two corpses, ministers still try to advise with words, but this cannot stop Yin Sangin's atrocities at all. At this moment no one can contact Queen Insu. Without a person who can make decisions, the ministers suddenly become lambs to be slaughtered. Yin Sangin rushes into the history archive to find the historical records of that year. He wants to kill everyone related to his mother's death. He gathers the ministers first to rehabilitate his mother. Ministers think rehabilitating the deposed queen. Ministers think rehabilitating the deposed queen will let this event pass. But unexpectedly, as soon as she is rehabilitated, Yin Sangin says, since the queen mother was innocent, then those who participated in ordering the queen mother's death back, then, are all guilty. He orders the city gates of the capital closed, killing or exiling the direct participants. Killing or exiling the direct participants. The deceased Han Mingho and several other former old ministers are dug up and beheaded, corpse desecration. Those not dead yet are arrested and interrogated strictly. At this time the chief state counselor and left state counselor advise the king to stop. The king convicts them on the spot and beats them to death personally. The king goes to find his grandmother again. The head eunuch blocks the front. He tells the king, in this Joseon founded on loyalty and filial piety, the king has committed an unforgivable crime and has lost the people's hearts. The king doesn't care and shoots the head eunuch dead on the spot carrying a sword. He breaks into his grandmother's room. He wants to rehabilitate his mother. He asks his grandmother to offer a cup of wine at the grave-moving ceremony and admit his mother was wronged. Insu still has only one sentence. You will never get rid of the title of a sinner's son until death. The king also leaves a sentence. Tomorrow, even if I have to carry you, I will carry Insu to my mother's grave. Insu instructs trusted ministers must protect Prince Jinseong. Well, then she passes away that night, strong all her life, experiencing 4 reigns. Insu, who was always at the center of power, is finally angered to death by her grandson dying with eyes open. She is still regretting why she didn't depose the grandson together back then. Meanwhile, Yin Sangin also fails to realize the wish to make his grandmother apologize to his mother. After rehabilitating his mother and posthumously titling her Queen Jihyun the next day, this massacre of ministers is also declared over. At the same time, the foundation of Yin Sangin's rule has already been shaken. 2 years later, the brother of Yin Sangin's aunt, wife of Grand Prince Wolson's brother-in-law, or similar relation, forms a punitive army and overthrows Yin Sangin's rule in one fell swoop. Honoring Prince Jinseong, as King Yin Sangin is exiled and dies of illness 2 months later at the age of 31. Because of his tyranny, he has no temple name or posthumous title after death, only the title of Prince Yonsan. From then on, he lies in the darkest corner of history.